In more terrible news this week, the Senate chose to reconfirm Ajit Pai to the FCC for 4 more years in a 52-41 vote. Now, this is problematic because if Ajit Pai was not reconfirmed, then that would have certainly saved net neutrality, at least in the short term, because that would have left one Republican commissioner and one Democratic commissioner, and the FCC would have been deadlocked, and they would not have been able to approve Ajit Pai's proposal to gut net neutrality. So in voting to reconfirm Ajit Pai to the FCC to finish his 5-year term, the Senate effectively sealed the fate of the internet, and it's almost a guarantee that net neutrality will now go the way of the dodo. Now, shortly after being reconfirmed, Pai released this statement. I am deeply grateful to the U.S. Senate for confirming my nomination to serve a second term at the FCC and to President Trump for submitting that nomination to the Senate. So that means that presumably there are 53 people that are happy about this. Ajit Pai and the 52 senators that voted to reconfirm him, because this is such bad news that even one of his former colleagues on the FCC called his plan crazy. So Jessica Rosenworcel described the FCC's plan, which is being spearheaded by Ajit Pai, to lower broadband standards from 25 to 10 megabits per second as, quote, crazy. And lowering the standards for broadband is just one of the many ways that Ajit Pai is screwing over the American people at the behest of ISPs. Now, I was actually pleasantly surprised with the fight that Senate Democrats put up to try and block Ajit Pai from being reconfirmed, but unfortunately, any procedural hurdles that they tried to use, it just wasn't enough because, simply put, Republicans hold a majority of seats in the Senate. So anything that Democrats tried to do, it didn't really seem like it would have worked. So reconfirmation was basically a foregone conclusion, according to a lot of reports. Now, Colin Letcher of The Verge explains, a campaign was mounted by Democrats to block Pai's reconfirmation, and during a floor debate, Democratic senators criticized Pai's agenda. Ahead of the vote, Senator Elizabeth Warren criticized Pai for his laissez-faire approach to media consolidation and pointed to regulations ended by Pai that benefited conservative TV station owner Sinclair Broadcast Group. Warren said when Trump nominated Pai, Sinclair got exactly what it wanted. Senator Maria Cantwell, citing Pai's deregulatory crusade against the current net neutrality rules, said last week that she would be voting against his reconfirmation. In a speech, she said Pai had shown disdain for important public interest principles. He's taken actions that I think will have consumers paying more for less internet access. So I typically don't give Democrats much credit, but credit where credit is due. In this instance, they actually did have a spine, and most Senate Democrats did the right thing in not only challenging Ajit Pai, but voting no on his reconfirmation. But of course, not all Democrats fell in line, because there was one Democrat in particular that not only voted for Ajit Pai to be reconfirmed to the FCC, but literally bragged about doing it. Can you guess who? Well, of course, it was Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So shortly after the vote occurred, he took to Twitter to state, I voted to confirm Ajit Pai. We've worked closely on ways to bridge the digital divide in West Virginia, and I look forward to continuing this work. Now, he also released a statement saying, I was glad to vote to confirm him as the FCC chairman. Ajit and I have been working together on a number of ways to bridge the digital divide in our country. You just voted for someone that's going to destroy the internet as we know it. Now, the example that he's citing there in bridging the digital divide, that's a talking point. Ajit Pai is not improving the internet. They try to sell you on Ajit Pai by saying he's trying to expand access to the internet to rural areas, but what he's really doing is he's making the internet a more pro-corporate entity, which is bad for everyone. It's bad for consumers, and the only people it benefits are the CEOs of Verizon, Time Warner, Comcast, and AT&T. So Joe Manchin is lying to you here, but of course he's not alone, because we also had other Democratic senators vote to confirm Ajit Pai. There were 4 in total. So there was Joe Manchin, there was also Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Jon Tester of Montana, and Gary Peters of Michigan. But it's not just Democrats, of course. There were Republicans that bragged about voting to reconfirm Ajit Pai. We had Republican Senator Pat Roberts declare that he was, quote, proud to vote to confirm Kansan Ajit Pai to the FCC. Look forward to working with him on expanding access to broadband in rural areas. Same talking point. Republican Senator Cory Gardner also tweeted, congrats to my friend Ajit Pai on his confirmation as chairman of the FCC. And then Shelley Moore Capito states, proud to vote to reconfirm my friend Ajit Pai. He's been a great partner in my efforts to bring broadband to West Virginia. But look, here's the thing. Those Republicans voting for Ajit Pai and then bragging about it, that doesn't surprise me. But for Democrats, I expect better. Even though the Democratic Party is sold out to special interests, you still expect them to be better. And we should hold them to a higher standard because they claim to be the party of the working class, to be the party of the people. And yet, with 4 Senate Democrats voting to reconfirm this shill who's going to destroy the internet, I think that the Democratic Party should rain down on them. I mean, Chuck Schumer should reprimand them for what they did. This is unforgivable. It's unacceptable. And I hope that every single one of these corporate Democrats lose their primary election. There's no excuse. If you vote for Ajit Pai, someone who is just brazenly a shill for Verizon and Comcast and AT&T and Sinclair, there's no excuse for you. You are irredeemable. There's nothing about you that makes you a good politician or even a good person, because in voting for someone who's going to destroy the internet, you're stifling democracy, because we use the internet not just to communicate with each other and to access information, but the internet has been integral to democracy. I mean, we use it to look up politicians that the mainstream media doesn't cover. I mean, I think that Bernie Sanders' campaign wouldn't have had half as much steam and momentum as it had without the internet. So Ajit Pai is now going to do what he was planning to do all along. Roll back Title II net neutrality regulations and completely fuck the internet for ordinary Americans. It's a sad day in America.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.